or another company to return to the U.S. to finish the pipeline that would bring Alberta oil to U.S. refineries.
Economically prosperous and independent again, we need to take advantage of the incredible endowment of resources that we enjoy.
Canada is freaking out after Alberta dropped a bombshell about a new pipeline with the United States. Ottawa is already furious with Alberta's growing referendum momentum, and now plans to kill the Ontario pipeline idea. With rejection certain, Alberta is already preparing to lock in a deal directly with the U.S.
We want our pipelines built.
I believe we're going to see shovels back in the ground this year.
You know what's hilarious? Alberta actually tried being nice for decades. Hey, Ottawa, can we maybe build something, please? Pretty please? And Ottawa's answer was always the same. Sit down, pay your taxes, shut up, and maybe, just maybe, if you behave, we'll let you expand a pipeline in the year 2075. That was the game for years. But now, Alberta's like, nah, we're done. Danielle Smith literally signals that Alberta could build a pipeline with Ontario first, but let's be real. There's a 100% chance Ottawa is going to smack that idea down before it even hits the drawing board. That's why she's already warning, if Canada blocks it again, Alberta's marching straight south.
The funny thing about this particular emissions cap, it wasn't imposed on any other type of production, not on the production of cement, or steel, or aluminum, or any other product mined or manufactured in Canada. No, the cap was placed on just one single sector.
And the plan? It's not some fantasy sketched on a napkin. We're talking about a beast of a project, a 42-inch wide monster of a pipeline designed to carry 1 million barrels of oil per day. 1 million. That's not just big, that's nearly a quarter of Alberta's entire output. Remember, Alberta already pumps out 4.2 million barrels daily, which is about 1.5 billion barrels every single year. So imagine, in one shot, a single project hauling away a quarter of that. It's massive.
Ideological argument is not just a minor disagreement. Oil is by far the most valuable export.
And here's the thing. This isn't some pipe dream where people hold press conferences and then nothing happens. Alberta has already sunk $350 million into this thing. Land purchases? Done. Environmental compliance? Paid for. Early construction? Already moving. Steel is literally in the ground. You can feel Ottawa's blood pressure spike just hearing that.
We're starting to understand that we've been shooting ourselves in the foot. We are far too economically dependent on one customer, and that if we want to be...
Why? Because this isn't the old Alberta begging for permission anymore. This is a province saying, thanks, but no thanks, we'll do it ourselves. And Ottawa hates that. For decades, the whole federal model was based on Alberta coming hat in hand. Now the leash is broken, and the dog isn't running back, it's bolting across the border. Danielle Smith even calls it a nation-building project. Not just steel and oil, but sovereignty, dignity. Basically, Alberta standing there with a pipeline in one hand and middle finger in the other.
And yet, that is exactly what Canada has done to itself. The results? High unemployment, massive federal and provincial budget deficits, hundreds of billions in investment capital fleeing the country, and a country under the economic...
But before we start clapping, let's rewind for a second and look at why Alberta is here. Because trust me, they didn't wake up one morning and think, you know what would be fun? Picking a fight with Ottawa? No, this is the result of decades of betrayal. It's a pipeline graveyard out here. Keystone XL? Gone. And it didn't just vanish quietly. It took 1.3 billion taxpayer dollars with it. Poof. Burned. That project alone could have unlocked 2.5 million barrels per day of capacity. You know what that translates to? About $55 billion in GDP every single year. Yeah, you heard right, 55 billion. Instead, Alberta got nothing but a hole in its wallet.
Northern Gateway Pipeline, canceled. Energy East Pipeline, canceled. New oil...
And then there was Northern Gateway. Remember that one? Scrapped in 2016 because Ottawa slapped on an oil tanker ban on BC's north coast. So that trillion-dollar resource asset Alberta sits on? Locked away like it doesn't exist. Energy East? Abandoned before it even left the blueprint stage. And let's not forget the countless oil sands expansions that were shelved before they even had a chance. Add it all up, and the price tag is stomach-turning, more than $500 billion in lost opportunities. $500 billion gone. Like setting fire to a mountain of cash.
Then specifically targeted the world's most valuable single deposit of natural resources, the Alberta oil sands. They banned all oil tankers off the northwest coast of BC, landlocking a $1 trillion asset that would have enriched the lives of millions of Canadians for generations.
And it doesn't end there. Every single year, Alberta bleeds out another $55 billion in GDP losses because of Ottawa's chokehold. On top of that, $17 billion of provincial revenue vaporized annually. That's money that could have built hospitals, schools, highways. Instead, it's gone. Why? Because Ottawa decided Alberta's growth wasn't convenient for their politics. And the tools they used? It's not a mystery. Bill C-69, which might as well be renamed the No More Pipelines Act, turned every project into a bureaucratic circus. Confusion, red tape, regulatory paralysis, exactly what you'd design if your goal was to kill investment?
Fact that in order to complete the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion to Vancouver, Ottawa had to step in and buy the project from a private company that lost billions trying to navigate through all this government red tape and ended up spending tens of billions of dollars more than initially.
Pair that with the oil tanker ban and then the oh-so-green emissions cap. And get this, that cap, it wasn't slapped on cement, steel, or aluminum. Nope, just oil and gas. One sector, targeted like it was some villain in a Marvel movie. The result? Canada earned the reputation as one of the worst places in the world for resource investment. Investors didn't just leave, they fled. Straight to the US, the Middle East, anywhere but Alberta. Ottawa basically built a giant neon sign that said, "Don't invest here."
But there is one big issue that's inextricably linked in voters' minds to the economic troubles in Alberta, and that's pipelines. A fundamental source of Alberta's economic malaise is that there's no good way to transport oil from the oil sands to refineries in the United States.
Now let's talk about Alberta's actual weight in this country, because Ottawa acts like Alberta's some pesky little cousin, when in reality, it's the one paying the bills. Alberta's GDP sits at $340 billion. That's 14% of the entire Canadian economy, powered by only 11% of the population. Do the math, it's insane. 1 out of every 10 Canadians lives in Alberta, yet that small group is carrying nearly a sixth of the economic load. And how does Ottawa thank them? By punishing them with rules and taxes. Equalization payments have turned Alberta into the ATM of Confederation. In the last decade alone, Alberta shipped $250 billion more east than it got back. $250 billion siphoned out with nothing but insults in return. And that's just scratching the surface. Energy alone contributes $70 billion every year to Canada's GDP, $70 billion. And if you add Saskatchewan into the mix, these two provinces provide a jaw-dropping 75% of the country's oil output. Think about that for a second. 3/4 of the entire nation's oil comes from 2 provinces that Ottawa treats like colonies.
They made new pipelines virtually impossible to build through the passage of the unconstitutional C-69 No New Pipelines Bill, which added so much confusion, uncertainty, and red.
It's not just Alberta screaming into the void either. The Conference Board of Canada has already crunched the numbers. If Ottawa sticks to its federal caps, Alberta could lose $1 trillion in GDP by 2050. $1 trillion, along with 150,000 jobs and $200 billion in provincial revenues. That's not an inconvenience, that's a death sentence for any economy. And let's be clear, the damage doesn't stay contained in Alberta. If Alberta goes down, Canada goes down with it. Without Alberta's contributions, Ottawa stares at a $20 billion hole in its budget every single year. That's not belt tightening, that's collapsed territory. It means federal programs, services, and transfers start crumbling because you simply can't fill that kind of gap by raising a few taxes. That's the nightmare Ottawa doesn't want to admit. Their panic isn't really about barrels of oil, it's about losing leverage. Because once Alberta proves it can run its economy without them, what's the point of Ottawa's control anymore?
Earned the reputation as one of the very worst places in the world to invest in resource projects.
And that's exactly where we're at today. Alberta is sick of being told no. Sick of projects dying on paper while billions flow out the door. Sick of being treated like a junior partner when it's actually the backbone of the whole damn country. This new pipeline idea, first floated with Ontario, but ultimately heading south when Ottawa blocks it, is Alberta's way of saying, we don't need you anymore. And that's what terrifies Ottawa the most. Because the moment one province breaks free, others start asking why they're still playing Ottawa's rigged game. Let's talk about why this whole US pipeline plan changes the game completely. First off, the Americans are basically screaming for oil. Their demand sits at around 19 million barrels every single day, but they only manage to produce about 13 million. Do the math? That leaves them with a 6 million barrel shortfall daily, and Alberta just so happens to be sitting there with exactly what they need. It's like your neighbor running out of bread every day, while your pantry is overflowing with loaves, and you're standing at the fence holding a basket saying, well, I've got plenty, want some?
The federal government needs to commit to working with the provinces to change the law to ensure there is no federal interference with the approval of in-province resource projects.
Now here's the fun part. Alberta already sends 80% of its oil south, but this deal is different because it locks that flow tariff-free. That means Alberta's crude isn't just oil, it's a bargain. Cheaper than Venezuelan oil, cheaper than Middle Eastern imports, and without the headaches of dealing with countries that might flip-flop tomorrow. If you're an American refiner, this is a dream come true. Steady supply, predictable prices, and zero political tantrums. And it gets even better because Alberta's heavy crude isn't just compatible with US refineries, it's basically designed for them. Their facilities are literally built to process this exact type of oil. It's like plugging a charger straight into the socket it was made for. No adjustments, no costly upgrades, no wasted time. Just straight efficiency.
We all know Canada's economy is suffering right now. We've had an inflation crisis, high unemployment, declining GDP, capital investment fleeing Canada for other countries, massive federal deficits.
Meanwhile, in Washington, whispers are turning into serious conversations about bringing back the Keystone XL pipeline. You remember the one Ottawa refused to fight for? Yeah, that one. If revived, it could add 2.5 million barrels a day of new capacity, which translates into about $55 billion in GDP annually. Imagine that tied directly into Alberta's new anchor deal. That's not just oil moving, that's Alberta becoming the central artery of North America's entire energy bloodstream. And from the American perspective, Alberta is the safe bet. Stable democracy, clean extraction compared to a lot of competitors, and no geopolitical drama. They don't have to worry about civil wars, sanctions, or dictators suddenly nationalizing assets. It's basically like buying energy insurance. You know the supply is coming, you know it's clean, and you know it's safe. That's worth its weight in gold for them.
Most Canadians see the lack of oil pipeline capacity as a crisis. In Alberta, it's creating a sense of rage.
But the real kicker? This shift hands Alberta direct leverage at the continental level. Ottawa can scream, stomp its feet, and wave its little veto papers. But if Alberta is cutting deals straight with Washington, Ottawa is just background noise. For once, Alberta gets to sit at the trade table, not as someone begging for scraps, but as a partner holding the cards. And that scares Ottawa more than any pipeline capacity ever could. Now here's where things get even more interesting. Because this pipeline isn't just about oil, it's about building an entire corridor strategy. The design is scalable and modular. You don't just build it once and stop. You can tack on more capacity as demand grows, lateral lines, pumping stations, new branches. It's like upgrading your internet plan whenever you need more speed. Alberta's not just building a pipeline, they're building a system that grows with them.
A majority of people polled considered the lack of new pipelines to be a crisis. As Terry Reese tells us, in Alberta, that feeling is nearly unanimous.
And it's not only for oil. The vision here is bigger. A continental trade corridor that can move oil, gas, minerals, wheat, uranium, potash, LNG, you name it. For decades, Alberta's wealth was choked off by a lack of access. This flips that script completely. Suddenly, the West isn't landlocked, it's the highway. Now let's put this against Ottawa's record, because the contrast is hilarious. Remember the Trans Mountain expansion? The supposed crown jewel of federal pipeline projects? That disaster finished years late, ran 300% over budget, and had to be bought out by taxpayers because no private company could stomach the red tape. It was a mess from start to finish, and Ottawa still pats itself on the back like it accomplished something. Meanwhile, Alberta is pushing a pipeline that's private-led, fast, expandable, and actually makes financial sense. One looks like incompetence, the other looks like proof of concept.
The Premier says Alberta's government is trying to find private sector partners for a potential pipeline.
And proof is exactly the point. This isn't Alberta holding a protest sign. This is Alberta building steel in the ground and showing everyone it can finance, build, and operate megaprojects without Ottawa's blessing. That's a precedent. And once it exists, you can't put the genie back in the bottle. But here's where the political stakes shoot through the roof. Quebec is already eyeing another referendum, their third attempt at separation. Meanwhile, Alberta's petitions are crossing thresholds, and people are openly talking about leaving. The momentum isn't fading, it's building. And every time Ottawa blocks, Alberta acts. Every time Alberta acts, Confederation gets weaker. The existential question has flipped. It's no longer, can Alberta survive without Ottawa? That's already been answered, yes, easily. The new question is, can Ottawa survive without Alberta? With the numbers on the table, the answer is looking more painful by the day. Danielle Smith and the West have drawn a line. If Ottawa keeps vetoing, suffocating, and pretending Alberta's energy doesn't exist, then Alberta will simply turn south permanently. And once Albertans taste what real independence and sovereignty looks like, there's no going back to the old days of begging for permission. That's what's terrifying Ottawa right now. Not just the barrels, not just the budgets, but the reality that the leash is snapped and the West is finally walking free.